Hello, everyone, and welcome to, let's call it our weekly digest, where we process together all the stuff that we eat daily about death, dying, grief, and loss.
Yeah, so what are you guys thinking about today? What should we talk about? I mean, we've always got something, right?
We always do. I really appreciate having this consistent time talking about what's on our hearts on a weekly. And
Yeah,
what I have woken up to is we had the loss of a political person, and I don't know him. I just know the news, but it seems like some people disparaged him even after he was died. And the thought that somebody could die and somebody else could say, "Well, that's good," made me pause because
mhm,
was it's there was an origin of respect around when people died. Community showed up,
yeah,
and there was a loss. There was a loss of a family member, a father, a son, a community member, and the fact that humans in this country can say it's good that they're dead,
yeah,
I find it a little bit repulsive.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that no matter how hell-bent an individual might be on harming other people, and I think this is like my foundational theological value. It's still a sibling to me, this
mm,
relationship, and their harm is their harm, but they are still my brother and sister, right? So, I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
So, let's talk about how we don't respect somebody passing anymore.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, even as I was thinking about who are there in this world, and there are some who, when they died, I would feel sort of relief, if you will, because I would feel like, oh my God, maybe they won't be able to harm people anymore. And but I probably wouldn't say out loud, especially on a public forum, like, "Oh, good," like, "Who needs that
Mhm,
person?" Because
mhm,
that would be against my feeling of, yeah, we are human. We're all human. Even the worst of us are children of somebody and have come
mhm,
here on the planet to do some kind
mm,
of to
mhm.
represent something for all of us to learn from. So
That's right.
that's my belief. And so even the worst, there's some kind of lesson that came from that we should acknowledge and care about. And so, yeah, and I think that we see that too often in our world because we don't really connect with each other on a community basis. We don't know, like we met Masanko a bit back. You'll see an episode with our friend Masanko who was talking about in Africa, the whole village knows when somebody dies and they all
Mhm.
participate in that in the
Right.
grieving and the loss, and it's not like a mystery, like who knows if somebody in
W
their neighborhood dies or somebody even
right.
I even was thinking that I have a lot of people that I know from my current work. Somebody just died recently and nobody told me about it because I haven't been in touch
Mhm,
with them for a while.
mhm,
And I heard secondhand, wow, it would have been nice to know that. But we lose
mhm,
track of people and then we don't know. And so it's not, yeah,
mhm,
what a loss. I think that's a big loss we can talk about today.
mhm, mhm. Sam, do you have any thoughts?
Oh my God, so many, but which ones do we share here?
Right.
Um, yeah, as both of you were speaking, I had many things flitting through from the increases in public deaths and the
Mhm,
polarization in in our culture, in our country, and how that get I don't know, either gets in the way or is indicative of the disconnect, that communal disconnect,
Mhm.
where
yeah,
it's in group, out group, and if it's the out group, you're glad they're dead.
Mm.
right,
And that has happened multiple times in very public ways,
Yeah.
in
right.
just this last year too. And,
Yep.
but I don't think I wanna get dig deeper into that right now. Um, what what you're talking about, Wakil, about the community coming together, and when you said, um, hearing secondhand, hearing third hand. Right now, I'm staying with my mom in her, uh, sort of retirement, independent living community down here in California. And part of the conversations on the street when you're walking around is who in the neighborhoods died this week or
Right.
this
Mhm.
month. Did you hear Doris down the
Mhm.
street died
Mhm.
yesterday?
Mhm.
And um and so there's some of that talk, and it is in the field, but every time I encounter it on our walks or whatever, there is still a disconnect. Even in
Right.
a tight
It's very insular.
community village, insular like this, it's
Mhm.
still, there's not like, oh, let's go do a vigil, or are we all going to meet in the clubhouse and talk about
Right, right.
Doris and her place in this community.
Or
Mm.
Even
even
in a
go ahead.
community of like a community of like 50 houses,
You're
Yeah.
right.
it's not
Well,
happening necessarily.
there isn't, I mean, this country is really lacking the tools to facilitate connection.
Masanko. Yeah, Masanko.
Masanko,
Yeah.
he talked about how when someone dies, someone will show up with a chicken, the bowls, the firewood for the fire, and, like, all the elements to do a vigil or a community, ceremony, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people understand that there is a need, we're gonna, like, show up, even if it's probably a bowl of beans, whatever. When I lived in France, I remember that there's, like, florists everywhere, people
Hmm.
constantly buying flowers for every occasion, right?
Mm.
In this country, people don't generally give flowers unless they're ordering it for the funeral. There's nothing that we have been taught to say, "I'm going to go, you know, stop by the grocery store and buy a little, you know, a fruit basket or something and just go drop it off."
Hmm.
People don't know what it takes to show up for others. They don't understand it, and it's still, I think it makes them queasy to think about, like, going to do that, like, "I don't wanna disturb. It's
Yeah.
too weird." Like, I don't know what to say. But this we don't have a culture where where it's been modeled. Everything's been usurped. The power of community has been usurped and taken by funeral homes, and so now the only thing people do is donate online so that there could be, like, a floral arrangement, one of those big gaudy ones, you know? Like, there isn't anything sweet for the families at hand, and so, yeah,
And
Sam,
we have, yeah.
I think people just don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and we often don't show up at all until there's a ceremony, and even then, only if we've heard about it or something, and if somebody that we get that notice because we're on their list or whatever. I was thinking about
Right.
that the other day of the lists, part of what I include in my class about planning is making a contact list of all the people, you wanna have notified and the ones you don't wanna have notified, and,
Mhm.
um, but that leaves out and that's where this thought came to me the other day when I heard about a person I really cared about when I was doing that career and haven't heard from for 20 years since I quit, or 10 anyway. And I thought, none of those people are on my list. So if I died, none of them would hear about it either, and
Mhm.
they might be bummed out about that. But I think it would
Mhm.
also occurred to me is, and I don't know if it's the United States in particular. I wonder, I think maybe Britain has similar kind of angst, or a similar kind of way of looking at things. I don't know. Maybe it's Europe, maybe it's not. Maybe it's the Western world, maybe not. And there's probably examples all around the world of places that do this better than we do and maybe do it worse. But the point being that what would be the ideal? How could we find an ideal? Or what could we change? I guess, not only to talk about there's a problem, but what could happen that would be different? And one of the things we all work on to some extent is this idea of um, uh, helping each other out in our, creating community and helping each other out.
Like a
And
mutual
Mhm.
aid.
mutual aid, thank you, that's the word.
Mhm.
Find it, the mutual aid idea. And we talk about this in a lot of different areas, but maybe one of those is finding out about your neighbors, getting to
Mhm.
know your neighbors, making
Mhm.
relationships with your neighbors so that even, like, I'm kind of thinking Sam's where you are now, Sam, is kind of an interesting example because they kind of have done that, right? They've created a community. It's closer. People know each other better. They're walking down the street. They're saying, "Oh, did you know Doris died?" Um, but they're still not. They still don't have the tools. And this is where I think we could work to create this kind of one piece of mutual aid is having those tools to say, "Oh, well, somebody died. What kind of ceremony should we create around that? And what
Mhm,
can we do immediately when that happens? And what can we do going
mhm.
forward? And what kind of rituals should we create?" We had a really nice
Yeah,
episode about rituals,
Mm.
it's
and
so
people
it
talk about that a lot with me about what I really feel
yeah,
like, so that would be important. So I don't know.
it
What do you guys think
is
about
it is so
a way
important, but
around it?
people are so, I'm not sure they're resistant or there's this, like, barrier to, like, having things like, I can't imagine having people ask about ceremony for somebody that you barely know. Like, I really
Mhm.
don't. Or a ritual. These are words that are almost verboten on the in common parlance.
Yeah.
And, I had a bunch of really young ladies over this weekend, and there was some hardcore, liberation folks who are the collective is where we need to be, like, straight up, you know? And then there's other young ladies who are like, "What is mutual aid? I've never heard of it." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, the work is, like, so, like, big." You
Mm.
don't like, people and then as soon as you start explaining it, they're like, "I really wanna get to understand this better." But liberation is, like, eh, taking the time to explain to people the essence of how we can support one another. But
Mhm.
in this, it's so hard to do. It's so hard because also language, the semiotics of all this words makes people very uncomfortable. I mean,
Yeah.
if death is something that, like, makes people shut down, imagine talking about, like, a collective to go help with, ceremony, like, "What? What is that?
That's a step
Yikers."
beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
so I don't know. I think that it's needed. I think that human beings are, have soul loss when they just don't understand that a part of our collective has passed and it matters.
Mhm.
Even for the really, harmful people who live and create lots of harm in our communities. I still pray for those folks because there's something there. I just have to believe. But I was also thinking about how, and I looked on in the Denver roster, but we need to take off that. Um, so many people die and nobody goes to claim them
Oh,
because
yeah.
there's not enough funds, right?
Yeah.
And so in our city coroner's office, there's a whole bunch of pictures of people who are been found and nobody's collected them.
Hmm.
Again, like the community at large is like, "Hey, what happened to your son? He's disappeared. Like, I haven't seen him for a while." And, mom might be like, "Well, he got killed and, I can't afford to pull him out of the the city morgue."
Hmm.
Why can't people just, like, be like, "Oh, we gotta get him out,"
Yeah,
like,
right.
this is not something that people wanna spend their time and energy in, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's want to have the tools to the
Understanding of
understanding. It's
Mhm,
there's so much of the disconnect, I think, is on a cultural level. We're so disconnected from just like being a part of the life and death cycle.
Yeah.
mhm,
For being able to look at that from ideas of collective action.
mm.
That's a dirty word in
It is,
so
it
much of our
really is.
culture, especially right now. Like, there's so much rhetoric
Yeah.
around any sort of collaboration, cooperation is socialism or communism, dirty, dirty,
Right,
dirty words
right.
that all, feed into a certain sort of perception that cuts off so many people from even being able to, like, understand that
Yeah.
as, like, a natural part, the narrative that it's natural to just be this atomized, isolated being, totally disconnected from everything else, which is
Mhm.
just, I mean, schizophrenic, sort of, uh, oh god, but
Yeah, we it's hard, right? It's a heavy
yeah.
lift to get folks to get to that point to have that conversation.
Yeah.
to even be talking about coming together as a
Mhm.
neighborhood
Yeah.
collectively
Mhm.
until you're in crisis. And,
Yeah.
there's
Right.
silver linings around crisis.
That's
A
right.
Right.
long time as a community building oriented person, studying it, I've seen, crisis brings people together. And the
Yeah.
trick
Mhm.
is, how do we get people cooperating before the crisis happens
Right.
Mhm.
so the crisis isn't as decimating and people don't have to scramble? And sometimes it's just out of our hands because
Mhm.
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
wounds, the damage to the collective spirit is so, so deep. And as you were talking on Lisa, I the word like reciprocity and
Mhm.
accountability came up.
Yeah.
And that can
Mhm.
be a terrifying concept for people too. That
Mhm.
that I don't want to be accountable to my neighborhood. I don't want to be
Mm.
accountable
Yeah.
Mhm.
in relationships of reciprocity with anyone in my neighborhood or anyone around
Mhm.
me, because what if they ask too much of me?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's
And
back
what
to
if
that fear we talked about a long time ago, but maybe there's not
Mhm.
enough.
right?
Yeah.
And what if I can't show up, or what if I ask and they can't show up, or they
Mhm.
judge me
Mhm.
for asking for help?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Right.
all these
Mhm.
messy little
Mhm.
like cultural enculturated
Yeah.
pieces. And like you're saying, always said, the work, it's such big work. It's
Yeah.
It
such
Yeah.
big work. And
yeah.
just
I wonder if it maybe even goes as far back as the Western culture's separation of the body from nature, or
mhm,
the
Mhm.
our the way patriarchy has grown up to say there's no don't have feelings, don't have that separates the cowboy mentality. We lift ourselves up by our bootstraps,
mhm,
Mhm.
and that's the right way to be, and we certainly wouldn't want to have crying or be sad, or we're tough, we can fight our way through this,
Yeah.
um, and that sense that which separates us, and really that comes in the Christian religion, goes all the way back to like the third century, where they said that where politics, where actually it was where when the beginning of Rome saying this is our religion, it was to use it as power, and to do that they had to separate out the feelings for each other, the community, and create this power structure,
Mhm.
and this separating the male from the men from the women, or not even that, the masculine from the feminine. I think it's that split is almost seems like that has become that's like we are the epitome of what happens if you keep that split going long enough,
mhm,
and it's
mhm,
become in our culture, and specifically in the United States culture, it's just become so deeply embedded that we can't it's hard to see beyond it. It takes a real effort of will
Mhm.
and a real effort of community and gathering and thinking about it and working on it to find a way around that, and to find a new way to be. So
Yeah.
I'd like to do that.
mhm,
I would too, and I think that our conversations are modeling what this means, right? To to be the springboard for, you know, thoughts that are like, "Wait, do I know my" let's just even say my extended family. Some families
Yeah.
are so, you
Yeah.
know, cut up and far away from each other. How do we mourn the loss of someone, whether we know them intimately or not? How do we show up when people are in crisis? How do we know, like, we don't have to, like, send money to a funeral home for flowers? We can actually show up at the grocery store, get a bundle, and, we do this in respect to the loss that somebody has encountered, right? Like,
Yeah.
these little small tokens of, "I see you. I bear witness to your loss. I'm really sorry." I mean,
Yeah.
where is that? That's all we need.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's where we start, by
Mhm.
ourselves taking on and thinking about and just sharing like we're doing here with others. This is a better. How about this as a different way of reacting to things or being with things, and it can grow from there, and it can grow, and we can purposely set aside time to be in community and say, let's practice what it looks like
Yeah.
to take care of each other. And that's another way. I know, one of my jobs in the past was emergency response, and we had all these emergency response plans that we practiced. Um, and I just was realizing that that kind of idea, it might be what you were talking about, Sam. How do we practice being in crisis? How do we get used to that so that we don't have to wait till the actual thing happens? And maybe one of the
Mhm.
ways is to create these communities and then say, what would it feel like if we had an
Mhm.
earthquake right now? How would we
Mhm.
respond to each other? How could we help each other? And
Who
then
are you
maybe,
gonna check on, you
yeah,
know?
and build
Mm.
that into the community up front,
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I love that idea.
Well, I was just thinking, I had this funny thought just cross my mind. One of my late, tias, my auntie, um, I heard tell, I've never got to ask her personally, but she liked to go to random people's funerals and sit in the back and cry.
I love
Mm.
And,
that.
like, she was, like, one of those, people who cried, and I think one of my uncles who asked her about it, he's like, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" She's like, "I feel like crying, and I wanna make sure, like, people, like, think, 'Oh, there is a loss.' I'm so," like, somebody actually cares." She's sitting in the back and she's crying, and so I love that as a practice, like, we don't have to know people intimately to feel a loss,
Yeah.
right? I'm
That's really
so
fun.
sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
sorry. Um, I mean, this is why I loved, when I was in hospice and got invited to, I would meet somebody for, like, a week or 2, and then they would pass. They
Mhm.
would die, and then I would get invited to the funeral, and I love the funerals. People would just, like, tell all these stories, and I would always think to myself, "I had this small kind of interaction with this person, but I am so much better of a human being from
'Cause
having
yeah.
have this moment with them," and I hope that people could like, find those moments that are gems of for our humanity,
Right.
for our story, our collective story, our own personal growth is embedded into the story of so many other people. How how can we, be brave and acknowledge the loss?
What a gift that is, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry for the loss of the person who passed away this weekend. Many people have passed away this weekend. I don't wish anyone to be told that it was good that they passed, unless there was pain and suffering and maybe they did wanna, they were ready. But to desecrate the loss of a human being by saying it's, good riddance feels like not a good model for us to follow.
There's a good that's a good way to put it. Bad modeling, yeah. Or like
Yeah. Let's do better, folks. Oh, my
Absolutely.
precious people. Anyhow, yeah.
Humans, we love them.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know, any other thoughts? Sam, do you have anything else you wanna share or think about with this before we say goodbye to folks for this time?
Yeah, the last little piece that comes up for me, only bringing up those counterpoints, we talked a lot about our, um, cultural disconnect from showing up for each other and from, ritual being a scary word and community or communal efforts being somehow, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
Disparaged?
yeah,
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 even disparaged, yeah.
um, or just uncomfortable, unfamiliar,
Mhm.
um, and also acknowledging that there are a lot of people waking up to the necessity of that,
Mhm.
doing a lot of work to untangle and uh, extract themselves from those enculturations.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people really into the idea of showing up for each other, mutual
Mhm,
aid, collective effort, community rituals, all that stuff. And so I don't
Yeah.
want to
mhm,
get too down on us. I
mhm.
want to lift up
Oh,
those of us
thank
who
you for
are
that, yes.
who
Yeah.
are into it and working and have the curiosity to, maybe, you know, uh maybe it's hard to get to know your neighbors when you move every couple years because of the
Mhm,
housing situation that we're in. But putting in the effort and uh,
Yeah.
and if you do have the privilege to stay in place for a while and get to know your neighbors, some people want to, you know, keep an eye on each other and
Mm.
uh
Mhm.
and if somebody dies, gather your neighborhood and just
mhm.
talk about the person, talk about their yard. We're,
Yeah. Yeah,
baby
I love that.
steps and
Yeah, pay
do what we
attention and
can.
be willing to look for that and find that or create that yourself. Yeah, so
Mhm,
for the folks in our audience, there are probably groups in your area and look for those and
mhm,
or begin to create them. And you can do it, like you said, baby steps, just one
mhm,
step at a time. Go meet the person next door that you've never talked to
Yeah,
and just get to know them a little bit. Have them over for a cup of coffee or, just these like kind of what we're doing right here. Just have a little chat, sit down
mhm.
and have a
chat.
chat and talk about
Yeah,
what's important to you and what you wish was going on in the world and how you wish things were different or how things are for you now. So
yeah,
yeah, we have that. We can do that. I think we
we
can
can
do
do
that.
that. And
Yeah,
if you're
just
particularly extroverted, um, do block parties. It keeps coming up. It keeps
yeah.
coming up that block parties to get to know your neighbors, whether
Hmm.
it's around something, maybe it's like, we're all parents, and so we want to, let's all
Mhm,
meet each other's kids so that we know, our kids know each other and we know who to keep an eye out for in the neighborhood or, whatever it is, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Block parties have been up as a way to really initiate community building. And I've said it
mhm,
before and I'll say it again.
Keep
mhm,
doing that. Yeah.
Meet your
mhm.
neighbors.
Yeah.
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 It's the first
And that
step.
that could be. I'm just remembering how challenging that was. We had a neighborhood that we were in that we tried to do that with, and we would get half a dozen people out of the 30 people who lived that we invited. Um, but even that, I mean, and that at that point, that was like, okay, that's a drop in the bucket, but it's a drop in the bucket, and it'll
Mhm,
ripple, and it
mhm,
did. We found that, even so, those 6 people then would talk to their next door neighbors and say, this is a group of us who are thinking about how do we support each other, and this was emergency management at that point. It was like, how do we support each other in an emergency, um, and who needs to be taken care of. And that was actually what happened is we found about an elderly woman whose son had a mental health issue, and she was kind of reaching out for help, and nobody was helping her. But one of her neighbors, who had been one of the 6, heard about her, and then the group came together, and we helped her with a lot of stuff that she needed help with. And so,
mhm.
like I said, that even though it might feel like it's slow, it's drops in the bucket, but remember that those drops cause ripples and that just it's worth it. It's worth it to whatever step you can take is gonna be another step. All right.
That's
So
right.
Amazing.
I am gonna finish with a poem,
oh, beautiful.
"For
Yes.
Whom the Bell Tolls" by
Yeah.
John Donne.
There you
Junior high
go.
school, English class, but truly, this is it.
Yeah.
No man is an island, entire of itself. Each is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thine own or of thine friends were.
Mm.
Each man's death diminishes me,
Mm.
for I am involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
It is
Thank
beautiful.
thanks for
Mm-mm-mm.
reminding us of that. That's great.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Bringing
Well,
us
Okay.
all together.
yeah, thanks so much, everybody. We hope you will listen again next week and subscribe and like and tell all your friends. And
And
we really,
email us.
yeah, check in.
What
We
do we
want
want to
to,
talk
Us.
about?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we would love to have this community grow and create, an actual conversation
Yeah.
going on an ongoing basis. So yeah, get in touch. Much love to all of you. Adios.
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 And die and grief and loss, conversations about the end of life.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Charles Heaston, the composer of the original music you are listening to now.
And of course, thanks to you, our audience, and all of our amazing guests. Please come back next week for another great episode. Share this with your friends, family, and community. We hope you will subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack. Each guest's additional information will be found in the podcast notes. And of course, if you have a good end-of-life story to share, please reach out. We are always eager to hear from you.